Welcome to the Exploring Unschooling podcast. I'm Pam Laricchia, longtime unschooling mom and author. Join me and my wonderful guests for interviews, information, and inspiration about unschooling and living joyfully with your family. You can find the episode show notes, your free introductory ebook, What is Unschooling, and lots more information at livingjoyfully.ca. And here's the show. Hi, everyone. I'm Pam Laricchia, and this is episode number 110 of the podcast. It's the 7th of February, 2018, as I record this intro. And my guest this week is Alan Marshall. Alan's an unschooling dad, a professional musician, and a university professor in the music department. We dive into his family's journey to unschooling, his eldest's transition to junior high, ways to approach music lessons and practice, advice for dads just starting out with unschooling, and lots more. As a personal update this week, it's been pretty relaxed around here. We've had 2 pretty big snows, so some shoveling has been in order, which I find quite peaceful. And it was my birthday a few days ago, 52. I'm going to own that. It was a lovely day. And another nice thing about February is that I can say it's spring next month. Yay. And a huge thank you to everyone who has chosen to support the show on Patreon. And a big welcome to new patron Heidi Worminghouse. I deeply appreciate all my patrons and their generous support, helping me share unschooling information and inspiration with anyone who wants to explore the fascinating world of unschooling. If you'd like to support the show, even for as little as $1 a month, check out the Exploring Unschooling page at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/exploring unschooling. And this week's quote is from Alan. Actually, I would discourage, particularly someone starting to do music and most other arts, from doing practice. I would say, don't practice. And really, I think the problem is formal practice. Like, I'm going to sit down now and I'm going to practice the piano for an hour because it's my practice time. Because I think that just doing that is pretty doomed to be counterproductive. In my opinion, as a musician and somebody who wants to help people who want to learn about music, that has discouraged a lot more music making than it's helped. I really loved his point that it's better to do than to practice. If a child wants to be involved in music or other performance-based arts, better to get involved in the doing first, in the joy of it. Thinking of an activity as practice adds a layer of separation from actually doing the thing. And lessons may at some point naturally weave into the picture. I thought it was such a fresh way to look at helping our children pursue the activities that engage them. And Alan shares some great examples in our conversation. So let's get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Alan Marshall. Hi, Alan.
Hello.
Hello. Alan is an unschooling dad, a professional musician, and a university professor. I've come across him online, and I'm really excited to get to chat with him in person. To get us started, can you share with us a bit about you and your family?
Sure. My wife, Melody, and I were both musicians, and we have 3 kids. Our oldest daughter is Addie. Our middle daughter is Kate, and our youngest son is Gabriel. They're 14, 9, and 5 years old. And we've been unschooling from the very beginning. We started learning about the principles of unschooling back when our oldest, Addie, was first born. And we did a lot of research at that time. And decided that we would unschool when she became school age. So all of our children started unschooling from the beginning of when they would have gone to school, which is in here where we live in Oklahoma, is age 5. We live in Oklahoma in the U.S. Yeah. in a small community, fairly small community in southeastern Oklahoma, Ada, Oklahoma.
Huh. So how you came across unschooling when your first child was born, around there? I'm always curious as to where
Around that
people
time,
actually
like,
hear it.
yes, just a few months old. I had thought about the idea of homeschooling,
Mm-hmm.
and so started to do some research online with the idea that we might homeschool. And before too long, came across a lot of resources about unschooling and found that really appealing. So got a lot of information when our oldest was very young, and started to apply the principles of unschooling very early, for all intents and purposes from birth, in terms of, sleep times and sleep patterns and baby wearing and unlimited nursing. And so that's something that's been part of how we parented from the very beginning.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so when school age kind of came, your days really didn't change at all, did they?
No, they didn't at all. Where we live in Oklahoma, the legal requirements for homeschooling are very easy. You literally don't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't ever sign up for school, and there's no other requirements. So for us, there was really no change that came when they became school age.
And now you guys have been unschooling for almost a decade, right? So I was wondering, is it about that long?
Yeah, right on 10 years. Yes.
Oh, yay. Good math.
Our oldest became school aged in 2008.
Ah, awesome.
Right, age 5 here.
Mm-hmm.
They're compulsory kindergarten. She could have gone to pre-kindergarten program, but it's not required. So
yeah,
we start counting from age 5. Yeah.
Age 5. So what has surprised you most so far about how unschooling has unfolded in your lives?
Well, there have been a lot of common surprises as far as how how things are for the children. Learning things in ways that that my wife and I grew up, believing, sort of tacitly aren't possible. Like learning to read in a week.
Yeah.
That's the thing. With our oldest daughter, something that was really surprising for me, even after doing research and understanding the principles behind it, the fact that my daughter just decided to set her own bedtime at a certain point at a very early age without being, coerced or told or even having a mention to her, really, was, my point of view before was that was just not on the list of possibilities. Mm-hmm. But, starting about age 7 or 8 or so, she just decided she wanted to go to bed about 9 o'clock every night and to wake up about 6 in the morning every morning. And that's what she still does all the time today. Mm-hmm. The common point of view is that that's really not possible, that if you just let a child stay up as long as they want, they'll stay up late all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. For
their entire life, and then, sleep in unless they're given a reason not to. But for some people, maybe that's true. But for her, she prefers to go to bed early and wake up early. There were some humorous times we had early on where we would ask if she might be willing to stay up a little later, so that we wouldn't have to get up quite so early in the morning. Back then, we would need to get up with her when we needed to be up with her to be safe. Mm-hmm. If, you have the inconvenience of needing to get up at 6 in the morning with her, either my wife or I, because that's what she preferred.
It's so fun to see how they explore just all their choices, right? All their options, and find what is unique to them. I always love hearing about all the different kids because they've all hit on things that, like you said, you totally unexpected, but they work so well for the individual, don't they?
Yeah. And it ended up working great for, how what she prefers to do, and kind of how her priorities it works perfectly for her. I'm kind of a night owl, so it doesn't always work great for me, but we work that out. And you had asked what was surprising. Something else I think is surprising and continues to kind of surprise me is how deep schoolish thinking and schoolish thoughts kind of run. For us as the parents, I still find myself, about the time that I think that I really understand and really have it all down and, feel like I know how unschooling should work. And it's good. And it's good. I have some confidence about it, having done it for a long time, but I always discover a new schoolish thought or, hear my father speaking, hear my father's words coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Inadvertently and have to, rededicate myself to thinking differently, and to doing things differently. And again, intellectually, I knew that would probably be the case from having thought about it and read about it for a long time. But then something like that will happen, and it's a surprise. Yes,
yeah,
indeed. I still,
that's such a great point. Yeah, exactly. You don't realize it's like it's just buried there, buried really deep inside, and then
yes.
things happen, and then all of a sudden that's been chipped free and out it pops, right?
Oh yeah.
I think that's. I know, like you said, you can realize it intellectually. I think something that's been helpful is to also be nice to myself when that happens. You know what I mean? Like you need to work on it and everything, but not beat yourself up, because that gets in the way of moving through it, doesn't it? That just adds yet another layer you have to work through.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's really helpful to, feel like it's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all parents are like that. That's just the way it's meant to be. That's not good, but also it's not good to be, to be so down on yourself that you made a mistake that you don't have the, you're not an emotional, you don't have the emotional, ability to correct the mistake, to do better next time. Because
so you're not like throwing up your hands. It will get you to that same point where it's like you throw up your hands, I can't do any better, and this is just the way
That's
it
just
is,
the way
right? Because like you said, it's amazing what you can find down there that's like, wow. Okay.
My oldest is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I was just going to say my oldest is 14, so puberty and the teenage years have recently brought up some of those surprising, oh yes, this is, here's my dad coming out.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And it's true, as they reach different milestones, different ages, things that you just haven't thought about in this context, in the context of unschooling. They just haven't come up been excavated to be thought about, really. So it's true. So many things and even as young adults, and there's so many conventional messages that we've grown up with that we will encounter along the way. So your eldest chose to go to a junior high school a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you could share a bit about how she found that transition, and whether or not you guys have found it challenging to weave school and your unschooling principles together.
Well, the transition for Addie has been surprisingly easy and positive for her. I always, I told a few people who I've talked to about it that unschooling was the perfect preparation for her to go to school, because her attitude about school is just very different than any of her peers. Mm-hmm. I mean, noticeably very different. And and if you go to talk to her teachers, the, I mean, to meet a teacher and have them talk about a student who wants to be there is really eye-opening. I mean, just the excitement they feel to be able to have her there because she truly wants to be there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a decision that she made, on her own, that this was what she wanted to do. And she has been, by any measure, successful so far in doing that. According to, it's been a positive experience for her, but also the feedback we get from people at the school is that she's, wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That she's great. And I think that's because she has a choice.
Yeah.
She wants to do it. And this was something that, we made a careful decision about. It was actually a few years between when she first started expressing an interest in it. We explored it then, and then we, took some time to really help her understand what it is, and to be sure that was really the choice she wanted to make, that she really understood what would be expected of her. And, that she had all the information that she, and that she didn't have any misinformation about what school was like, where she might be surprised by things that might not be what she was really wanting. But it turns out for her, I think she's pretty rare, but for her, it's exactly what she wants.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to learn in that environment. She really likes structure.
Mm-hmm.
So she thrives on the rules and the structure. For her, it's really something that, she enjoys.
Mm-hmm.
And because she could stop at any time, I think that makes it easier for her to, submit herself to that structure.
Absolutely. Because she's got choice, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt in her mind that if she ever decided that she didn't want to do that, she immediately could stop doing it. And then really, I mean, that makes all the difference. And to experience that with somebody that I'm close to and know, it's really a revelation. And even, like I said, even for me, it was a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And she's caught up in school in, what would seem like, record time. Like, like when she first went to school, she couldn't write at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like she had literally never written, anything more than her name. And it was just literally just a few weeks. And she was writing like Oliver Peters can.
Mm-hmm.
And she's taking algebra this year. She's essentially, she kind of had a little help with math her first year, kind of individual tutoring a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then now she's taking algebra. And I remember just a few days ago, she asked me to help her with some homework because I was good at math in school. So I'm kind of the math parent.
Mm-hmm.
Go ask your father. He knows about math. And she was doing some sort of Mongolian algebra thing I'd never heard of. And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if I can really help you with this. When I was in school, I didn't really do this, so I kind of have to." And so she taught me how to do it. And she's doing the equations and stuff, and she's, "Well, you just do it like this." So she's completely, caught up. That there was no effect of her not going to school.
Mm-hmm.
That I know of, that I can think of or have heard about. A few weeks, a few months, and she's just like any of other peers.
Mm-hmm.
Which of course you hear about quite often, right? What you learn, particularly in the early years of school, you can learn in a few months if you want to.
Yeah.
And she needed to, so she learned it.
Exactly. So did she do much preparation?
She didn't do any preparation.
Yeah. Just wanted to get that out there.
Yeah. She, literally nothing. She's a late reader, and she learned to read, not because she was planning to go to school, but because she got a phone. So she learned to read a few months before she went to school. just because she had exposure to write to letters and words kind of visually, she would like kind of look up how to spell things on her phone.
Yeah.
And that went on for maybe 3 weeks or so when she could read. So I guess you could say she prepared by learning to read, but she wasn't thinking, I've got to learn to read so I can go to school. She was thinking, well, I won't be able to read my phone. So she just did it.
Exactly. A reason. Personal reason.
Yes.
And so how have you and Melody found weaving that schedule into your lives and those kinds of, I would assume you don't bring a lot of the school's expectations into the bigger picture, right? Because this is her choice. No. She's doing it. And
yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of the end of it, right?
Yeah. And really, I try to avoid kind of knowing what her grades are, or just because I don't want that kind of schoolish thinking to kind of invade my attitudes, so I just try to keep myself kind of ignorant of all that sort of thing. But I mean, there have been some minor inconveniences of scheduling and, getting her place. She rides the bus, so she's at school before I wake up in the morning. So I'm in the afternoon. So in many ways, I'm unaware of most of it. Another impressive thing about what she's done to, go to school, decide that she wants to school, she has, completely done it independently. She makes her own lunch. She gets herself up. She goes to the bus. She's responsible. She's just taken responsibility for everything she needs to do it. Just because in her world, that's how you do it. And, it just didn't occur to her to do anything other than to do whatever she needed to do this thing that she wanted to, that was important to her. So that's that in a lot of ways, because of her and because of her initiative, it hasn't been too much of a inconvenience or hasn't interfered very much at all with what we want to do with our other children who are still unschooling. She just leaves in the morning and comes back in the afternoon and joins us when she gets home, and everything's is as it was before. So again, I think we're fortunate with the way things are structured here where we live, that there's not a lot of, expectations on parents who have children in school that are, what we might think of as unreasonable or kind of getting in the way or being heavy-handed. And we try to be involved in an appropriate way. Go talk to the teachers and, show our interest and support her. So, we're not keeping it at arm's length or anything like that. But we don't have a lot of pressure on us to do certain things or do, there have been some minor expenses involved, as you would expect. But
No, that's cool. And that's such a great point to be supportive and be supportive of her and as involved as she'd like you to be without that tipping over into expectations, which is one of the reasons why you aren't interested in seeing the grades and stuff like that, because you're being careful not to tip over into having expectations, or even, I guess, letting it play with your mind, I guess, as in, it's just easy to think of, good grades and that's wonderful, or bad grades. You know what I mean? That it can affect your interactions.
Yeah. And I can see myself, for me, the danger would be that I'd be all proud.
Yeah.
If she got A's or something.
Yeah.
And the impact that could have on, then if I'm really proud and if I'm sort of being effusive about that, and then at some point she doesn't get A's or something, then what message is that sending?
Yeah.
That's what's important. And it would probably be subtle. I probably wouldn't be obvious about it because I'm an unschooler, but there could be some subtle messages sent there.
I know. even not school wise, like other things that my kids choose to do, I am careful to be excited for them and as excited as they are for their accomplishment. Like, because once you get into that, oh, I'm proud of you for whatever it is, it kind of becomes about us. And then you're right, exactly. The next time, if it doesn't work out so well, then you're stuck, right? Because then you've set yourself up for that judgment, because it feels like a judgment when it's coming from you rather than the support and excitement for them having accomplished whatever it is they were wanting to accomplish. It's a subtle but really important difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, now I wanted to dive into your experience as a professor teaching music, because music is another area that I think it's really interesting to think of how we might bring in unschooling context to that. So, for example, there was I came up with a couple examples that I know I have seen questions about over the years, and I wanted to get your perspective on them. So, when a child expresses an interest in music or an instrument, so often the first thing that parents jump to is lessons, because so often it's not something that we are personally skilled at, right? So maybe we sign them up for piano lessons or guitar lessons or violin lessons. So I was wondering, in your experience, whether or not that's kind of the best first step when a child expresses an interest like that.
Well, I would say that it really depends on the situation very much. Mm-hmm. I would be really hesitant to make a blanket statement like lessons are always the best thing to start with, or never start with lessons. Yeah, that's a disaster or something. Or that unschoolers should never have their children take lessons, because I think it really depends on the interest of the child and how the child acquired that interest. It also depends on the reality of how you can learn to play the instrument or whatever musical or artistic endeavor you're doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you get interested in playing the harp, the classical harp, that's hard. That's fairly hard to do on your own for fun, right? It's a very expensive instrument. It's very specialized. Probably the best way to learn to play the harp is to find somebody who already can play the harp and have them help you. Now, that doesn't mean you have to give that person a check and have them give formal lessons for 60 minutes a week necessarily. But if you want to do something that specialized, you're probably going to have to go find somebody to help. Mm-hmm. But the guitar, you can go on YouTube, and even if you don't know anything about playing guitar or anything about music, your child can go on YouTube and get free guitar lessons 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And guitars are more ubiquitous and inexpensive. And, I think we all know of people, even people who aren't unschoolers, who just learn to play the guitar for fun. And they don't necessarily need formal lessons. They might want to take formal lessons at some point, or they might, become a rock star and never take a lesson in their life. So it depends a lot on each individual situation, the temperament of the child or the person who's wanting to learn, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't always have to be children. Adults can learn instruments. And learn music too. And also the availability of lessons, and how, in your individual situation, taking lessons could involve pressure that wouldn't be helpful from the teacher, maybe, mm-hmm. right? Sometimes the culture of music education is not as helpful as it could be in some places as in other places. If you can find a teacher who's willing to kind of work with your child and make it fun for them and not put pressure on, then lessons could be a really great experience for them. But if you're in a situation where, it's all, practice. You have to practice 5 hours a day, and I'm the teacher and you're the student, and you're going to do what I say. If they're very regimented, taking lessons could, decrease their interest in music rather than, nurturing it. So I hate to give such a such a non-definite answer.
Well, I gotta say, yeah, it's really an unschooling kind of answer, right? Because it depends on the individual.
And I'd say what I can offer as a musician that the non-musicians may not know is how much it depends.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, there are a lot of variables, and if you're not a musician, you may not think about those variables.
Mm-hmm.
I think it depends on the person too. I mean, there are people who are like, I want to be a concert pianist someday, right? As opposed to, I'd like to be able to play piano for fun sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And there's probably more people doing it just for fun than people who are really serious about it. But understanding, there's a lot of in between too. It's on a spectrum, and understanding really what the interest is. I think maybe that might be the most important thing, is really getting into the details of what the interest exactly is. Could play the piano or sing or play the clarinet, that's not specific enough.
Mm-hmm.
An understanding of the interest that the child had. Why do you want to play the clarinet? Where? What kind of music?
Mm-hmm.
For how long? Maybe. Even though it's okay to change your mind about that. Mm-hmm. But so I would encourage getting lots of information about what your child wants, also about what the situation is and what the possibilities are. The thing about lessons is that it's perfectly legal to stop taking them. Right? If it doesn't work for you, I would encourage making short-term arrangements at first, like, hey, we want to try this for a couple weeks and see if it works. Could I just pay for a few lessons and then we'll talk about it after and see how, he or she likes it, rather than making a big long-term commitment.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And you mentioned earlier just meshing with the culture of that teacher or that music school or whatever, because so often I think we can latch on to, we've heard something good about it, or it's the closest music school, it's the only one in town or whatever. And we can try to get our child to fit into that environment, right? So if they tell us, they have to practice for X amount of hours, or they have to start with this book and don't skip ahead, start with lesson 1, you think you have to, it almost puts us back in a student role, right? And then it's like, oh, okay, we got to do this. And all of a sudden we're pushing that on, but that you really can pick and choose the environment that meshes well with your child. And like you said, what they're looking for. Are they looking to just be able to play and make some music that they recognize, or do they have bigger goals with it, that kind of stuff? So the conversations with them and what they're kind of seeing in the future of this interest, and then finding the environment that meshes well with them, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think sometimes when something is, something that we're not as experienced with ourselves, mm-hmm. like if somebody's not a musician, it might be music.
Yeah.
For others, it might be something else that that they don't have a lot of background in. Mm-hmm. That could be a time for caution, to not let other people tell you how it should be because they supposedly know more. And sometimes musicians, I'm afraid, are can be a little bad about that, about, using their expertise to sort of impose their view of how things should be on others. Because you don't know about music and I do. And so this is how it should be. I mean, how would you know? You don't even, you can't even, play an instrument yourself or something. And I think it helps to just have the confidence to say, that I appreciate your expertise and your knowledge, but this is what's going to work better for my child. So I'm going to find a situation that works best for them.
That's a great point. Yeah. And that's basically was the next question.
Oh, okay.
For navigating situations, when that conventional advice of strongly encouraging practice, or, do it the way I know, I have this expertise. Tips for navigating that. Like, yes, absolutely. You know your child and what your child is wanting out of the situation, and it's okay to bring that with you, right? So even though you're not the expert in guitar or piano or whatever, it's okay to say, you know what? He wants to have fun, and it's okay if you follow his lead. I know I've done that a couple of times. That, with karate, it's like, no, it's not a big pressure for the next belt. I want him to enjoy it. It takes as long as it takes. And I remember once it was a computer programming camp, and there weren't many students who came in the summer. And I said, you know what? Yeah, don't worry about it. It doesn't, you don't have to show me some working program at the end of the week. I said, just kind of do whatever he wants to do and have fun with it. Don't worry about showing me something at the end. But yeah, so I didn't know either one of those things in any detail, but I knew what my child was wanting out of the experience. I wanted them to enjoy the experience. For me, that was the most important thing, right? Because that's where the best learning is going to happen too. And that's where they're going to learn more about how they feel about whatever activity it is that they're doing. And once maybe they're more excited and they want to continue with lessons, or maybe they find this is enough for now, etc. But that's how I think they get a better experience with what they're interested in, I guess, right? So it's an interest of theirs, and if they enjoy it, that's my goal more than whatever steps of progress they have set out. I guess to prove that they're doing their job, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I suppose they're used to needing to provide evidence.
Yeah, exactly.
To justify the expense. So sometimes it could be as easy as just letting them know you don't need to justify your work. I'm just happy, that they're having the experience, and that's enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's great. So I was curious then, with those two typical questions out of the way, how in the bigger picture you see unschooling and learning music, or really any art, weaving together.
Well, you were talking about practice, and that made me think about the idea of formal practice, and actually, I would discourage. Particularly somebody starting to do music or most other arts from doing practice. I would say don't practice. And really, I think the problem is formal practice, right? Like I'm going to sit down now and I'm going to practice the piano for an hour because it's my piano practice time. Because I think that just starting to do that is pretty doomed to be counterproductive. I think in my opinion, as a musician and somebody who wants to help, people who want to learn about music, that has, discouraged a lot of more music making than it's helped. That for most people, if you start by, I'm going to practice an hour a day, even if they're motivated, even if they want to do it, that's often not the best way to help them learn about music. I think it's much better to get involved in music making. And if your child wants to be involved in music, for example, or any art form, particularly something that involves performing, getting involved yourself in however you can in music making with your child in some way. I think, that might be the unschooling way to do it. Not, whether or not you take lessons, whether or not the child chooses to take lessons or that's the best option for them. I wouldn't just send my child off and say, go take lessons. Right. And then, pay our money and you've learned your music from the lessons and we're done. But get involved with them. Help them find ways to create opportunities, because that's what real practice is. Right. I don't know if you've heard of Malcolm Gladwell's 1,000-hour rule.
10,000 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. 10,000 hours. Sorry. I wish it was 1,000. That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
I know, right?
10,000-hour rule. You have to have 10,000 hours of practice in order to master something. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's certainly true that practice is important. And you're not going to get 10,000 hours of practice sitting down and forcing yourself to do it an hour a day or even 5 hours a day. Right? You're going to find ways to not really do it if it's drudgery.
Yeah.
You're going to, and that's even if you want to do it. If somebody on the outside is forcing you to do it, forget about it. Whether you actually sit at the piano, you're not going to practice an hour a day if you don't want to. You might tinkle around on the keyboard and seem like you're practicing so you don't get in trouble, but you're not really going to practice. But if you're involved in music making, if you're making music that you're interested in and that you want to do, that all counts as practice. As particularly if you're doing it with other people.
I love that. If you're just weaving it into your lives, right?
Yeah.
So becoming a part of that experience with your child, like not sending them off to lessons, but even if it's let's sing some songs together, or I'll sing while you're playing on the piano, or making it just something that you're doing with them, so that they're doing it, not I have to sit for an hour and practice my scales, right?
Yeah, and I'd say if you can learn, if your child's learning an instrument, you learn an instrument with them. Now, that may not be for everybody.
Yeah.
If some people have, bad experiences with learning instruments and they really don't want to do it. So I understand that maybe that's not everybody's choice, but if you can do that, what could be greater? I'll learn to play the violin too. Because I've always wanted to. And then maybe someday we can play some violin duets together. So, the ideal is that you're, actually physically there doing it with them. But if that's not possible, you could, find them opportunities, help find groups they can play in, sing in a choir or play with a band or an orchestra. And you can, some community bands and choirs and orchestras, they take you and your child, maybe, if you can, right? If you play, if you don't, that's okay too. And then, often if you're doing that, then lessons come up naturally, right? Like, I want to be able to do this and I can't, could I take some lessons so that somebody can help me be able to do this better? Because now I'm really interested in it. And I think often that's a better way to get to lessons than I've always wanted to play this instrument. I'm going to go take lessons to start. The very first thing to do. Yeah. Again, I don't want to say that, that's never okay. Because actually my daughter wanted to learn to play the flute. And she literally said, I want to take flute lessons. First time she played the flute was at her lesson. But again, that was a very specific situation. She had a very definite idea of what she wanted to do and how she wanted to do it. But my daughter loves to sing. She kind of inherited that. My wife and I are both professional singers, but she wanted to sing, and it was really because we're a musical family. It was sort of part of the background always. Yeah. But she just started singing with us in choir, in church choir, and just started she started doing little performances. She'd learn a song and then she'd find a way to perform it. Mm-hmm. And then after she'd done that for, a good 3 or 4 years in various ways, starting very, small, very occasionally, and then doing it more and more, then she decided she wanted to take voice lessons as a continuation. So it can happen both ways, but in both cases, we're with our daughter making music almost every day. And it's not just musical families that can do that.
Yeah.
For anything, you can find a way to do that. And to me, that for the arts, for anything, that's the unschooling principle that could be the most valuable. And it leads to, it will eventually, if your child's interested, lead to that, traditional result that you're looking for, that the child can play the instrument and wins a contest or something. Eventually something like that will happen. But if that's what if you just aim for that from the very beginning, less likely to happen and much less fun along the way.
Yeah, 'cause that's so true. When you've got a goal, like something that you want to accomplish, it's just more intrinsically motivating to get there when it's not, something that's 10,000 steps away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like something that is achievable. It's on, kind of like on your edge of your competence. So you need to learn to get there. So you're motivated. But it's something that you want to do, right? So you'll pick up the instrument or the art or whatever it is and do it when you've got a free moment because you want to, right? Because so rather than I need to do this for an hour because someday I want to be able to do X. No, if you're excited to get to that step that you can just see really close, you just whenever you have a moment. Like Michael, he's somebody who wanted to learn the guitar and he has learned through YouTube. And I sit in the other room and he's playing and I don't know whether he's playing music or he's literally playing it himself, so that has been a good experience for him. He knows, we went into the local music store a couple of years ago now because he'd finally got to a place where he wanted his own guitar. We had a couple lying around, but now he knew what kind he wanted. And he went and he tried out a whole bunch of them and he talked to the guy for an hour and had a grand old time picking his own guitar. But, he comes home from work and he gets home 11:30, 12 at night. And I wake up and hear him playing, because this is when he has the time and he's motivated and he enjoys it and he picks it up whenever he's got the time rather than, there's just something when someone tells you have to do something that you resist, isn't it? Instead of that hour, it's like, oh, when I find I have a moment, I'm excited to dive into that. It's just a different mindset.
And I don't think anybody has ever, become truly a master at something or really great at something or achieve something, remarkable as in music or in any field by forcing themselves to be interested in it.
Yeah.
You don't practice, 10,000 hours or whatever it is in order to become interested in being a musician. You practice the 10,000 hours because you're interested.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And, there's a lot of evidence that a lot of talent that people have actually comes from that intense interest and practice. That people who are really talented are really just so interested in it that they practice more than anyone else. But to them, it doesn't seem like practice. So it comes naturally. So,
yeah, they're just doing it, right?
Yeah, it seems like an amazing talent. And it's not necessarily that you couldn't have that talent too. It's just that you aren't that interested. You're doing something else that you're talented at.
Exactly. Yeah, and that comes back to choice again, right?
Mhm.
Making
yeah,
the
absolutely,
choices. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, last. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, I just wouldn't want anyone to feel like, in order to, have a child be really interested in music and want to do music, that they have to be from a musical family, or they have to have sort of the genetic background of music, being a good musician. That can be one way to get interested in music, but your child, if you let your child could be a great musician, even if you're not, it's possible. But you just have to let them decide for themselves whether, to discover whether they have that gift, and also whether they want to pursue that gift. And it's okay if they don't, but just don't assume it can't be done just because it's not you.
And something I've found through unschooling, because what you were saying there reminded me of your point. If your child is interested to in supporting that, support it as much as you can, and if you can get involved in it, even better, right? I have learned and found an interest in so many things that I did not know I would enjoy before having kids and before being introduced to it by them. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is fun. And yes, I'd love to do this with you, etc. So like you said, even if you're not musical, you don't think you could be musical, when you keep that open mind and support and try and engage with your child in anything that they're interested in, you may be surprised at all the interesting things that are out there in the world. You may find yourself enjoying, maybe not, dedicated as much to learning that particular instrument or even a instrument, but I bet you'll find so many interesting things just within the music or something. But when you keep an open mind, our kids introduce us to so many fascinating things that we wouldn't have ever imagined we'd be interested in. Have you found that?
Yes. For me, my youngest son he's only 5 years old, but he's really interested in kind of boy things, trucks and guns. So and that's something I've always been a music nerd and not been interested in those sorts of things my whole life. But now I'm starting to kind of, explore that side of myself, which I didn't really know existed, just by, just video games. I've never played a video game in my life, but I'm kind of helping him play his video games. Just in the natural course of just helping him be able to do what he wants to do. I'm sort of having some different experiences. So it'll be fun to find out if that continues.
Yeah. Our children expand our world so much, I think. Okay, now we'll get to that last question. I thought it would be... Oh, no, that was a great point. As an unschooling dad, I was just wondering what piece of advice you would like to share with other dads who maybe are considering unschooling or are just starting out on this journey.
For me, the thing that I've had to try to be conscious of the most, and I think this is related to my gender. As far as I can tell, to the extent I'm self-aware, it seems like this might be gender related, is I have to really think about being involved kind of day to day, moment to moment with my kids. Because this may not be something that all men share, but I think there's, in my example growing up was sort of that the male parent was kind of at maybe a little bit at a distance, kind of didn't do the day-to-day nitty-gritty work of parenting always. And, that's not necessarily because of traditional gender roles only, right? Sometimes it can be more subtle than that. Like I'm often the stay-at-home parent. My wife and I kind of switch off. We both work, but she works more than I do. So, I would be considered the stay-at-home parent if you had to, name one of us as a stay-at-home parent. But even though I'm the one actually at home often, kind of reversing that traditional gender role, still there's this more subtle kind of, male gender role idea of you kids play and I'll go do my adult stuff over here.
Do my thing.
Yeah. And I don't know, for me, I've just found that I really need to be aware of that and to make a conscious decision. I'm going to do this a little differently than was shown to me when I was younger, or maybe what the cultural expectations might still be. Even though I'm not a traditional dad, I need to, in the moment, in that actual time where I'm interacting with my children, I need to decide I'm not going to be the traditional male parent. I'm going to be playful. I'm going to joke around. I'm going to, wrestle. I'm going to do guy stuff with my son, even though that's not my immediate natural inclination. So, that's what occurs to me that might be helpful to talk about with other men, is to maybe be aware of that tendency. Whether you're a traditional sort of breadwinner and you come home in the evening and you see your children, or even if you are a stay-at-home dad, and you're the primary caregiver, still that might be going on. That dynamic might be there. And so I just think that's something that might be worth considering.
And have you found? Yeah, no, that's a great point. The and the tendency to, especially if our kids are occupied and they're doing things, the tendency to pull back and do our own things. But there's just so much we get out of that connection when we do engage with them, isn't there? So you're finding that to be a positive experience, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to, force myself to do it in sort of a negative way. I've got to go play with the kids now so that I can be a good unschooler. That's not an attitude that would be helpful at all, I don't think. More just, when the opportunity arises, really engage, really dig in, kind of, go out of your comfort zone a little. And also, use your partner as an example. My wife she's always been great with kids. So she sort of, is silly with small children to kind of, make interacting with them fun. And I've kind of learned from her, if I can, just be silly, kind of make a joke or kind of make things into a game, I can sort of get things going so that there's some interaction and then you get something out of that. So observing, moms, particularly my wife, and kind of learning, a different way of doing things might be a little different than what I'm used to, but not ever, really avoid having to be sort of in a resentful way where it's sort of a job, like I'm required to do this much interaction with the kids because in order to be, a good modern dad, I must do,
back to ticking off those boxes.
Yeah. I don't think that would be helpful, but
exactly.
But the time you do spend with them, just kind of expand your idea of what that means a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's such a great point, Alan. I'm really glad you brought that up. Yeah. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it, especially, your perspective on music and lessons. And, I always love hearing about other families on unschooling experiences. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me.
Oh, yeah. No, that was wonderful. And before we go, where's the best place for people to connect with you online?
Facebook is the best, easiest place to find me. Alan Marshall, ALAN Marshall. And I'm on Sandra's Facebook group, Unschooling Info.
Radical Unschooling Info? Okay.
Radical Unschooling Info. So I don't have a website, I'm afraid. So
yeah, no problem. I will put those links in the show notes. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. I hope you found it helpful. You might also like the backlist episodes at livingjoyfully.ca/podcast. While you're there, be sure to check out the first book in my Living Joyfully with Unschooling series, Free to Learn 5 Ideas for a Joyful Unschooling Life. In it, I share the 5 paradigm-changing ideas that most help me better understand unschooling. Reviewers have said, a quick read, but packed with ideas that challenge the dominant paradigm of our failing approach to learning, this little gem makes an excellent argument for unschooling. And I was rather doubtful about this book, as I had never heard of the author, but after reading it, I wish that I had read it years ago. I hope you find it helpful too. Free to Learn has also been translated into French and Spanish. Until next time, have fun living and learning with your family.